Oh my gosh. Okay, so we're trying, let me say it all again. We're trying something a little different. We miss book club so much. Unfortunately, Sexy Leader is so busy right now with school that it's hard to keep up on everything. So we are actually going to do a special ladies edition of book club, and we're going to be reading something that appealed very much to me and Jasmine, which is the Star Wars Republic Commando series. So if you'll recall, a while ago we read Hard Contact, which is the first book in this series by Karen Travis. And Jasmine fell in love with some clones. I had already been in love with them because this is possibly one of my favorite series in all of Star Wars Legends. And so I'm really excited to share, because I don't hear a lot of people talking about it too much. So I'm really excited to share this with other readers, and especially Jasmine, who is a simp for clones. And if you love clones, this is your series. And if you don't love clones, and see, this is the exciting thing. Going into it, I didn't care about clones. I was very much just like, what a boring concept, stupid characters. Like, they're just cannon fodder, who cares? And this series was like, no, they're people. You have to treat them as individuals, and they have characters, and they have wants and needs and desire. And I'm like, oh, now I feel for every single one of them. I love them. So yeah, this will change your life. Stinking Karen Travis and her clones.
Characters like.
Oh my gosh, I'm hearing an echo of myself. Sorry, I know it's because Jasmine can't do headphones. Sorry, we'll figure something out. So yes, we've read that first book, and now ladies edition, Jasmine and I are going to be embarking upon the second book, which is called 000, which, if you're into Star Wars lore, is the navigational code for Coruscant, the center of the galaxy. 000, boom, 000 for short. So here we are. We are reading this. Now, I did mention, and I actually don't know if Jasmine read it or not, there's a short story that takes place right before this novel, and they reference it a lot in this novel, the events of it. So it's really good to read the short story Targets first. And it is by the same author, Karen Travis, and it appeared in a Star Wars Insider magazine edition. So, Jasmine, did you read it?
Yes, I did. I actually read it first.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. It's a really great setup to this. Kind of brings us back into what Omega Squadron's been up to, introduces the kind of the null arc character Ordo that we get to know best, and Cal Scarata, their sergeant, who you heard a lot about in the first book. They talked about him a lot, but didn't really describe him much. We haven't met him as a character until now. So just to recap a bit, the events of the short story Targets. So it begins hilariously with a teen testing their new armor on Fi.
I love him.
By shooting him with a Verpine shatter gun, like point blank in the chest. They didn't even know if it was going to work. This was a test. And like, there's these rowdy boys. I don't even know.
But like, the thing is, that's like the true definition of boys will be boys. They're going to do stupid things like that.
But I love it. And this, it's such a genius writer move. Anybody who's followed along with book club knows that, to me, writing is so stinking important. And the tools that you use, and the way that you treat characters and story and arc and motivations. And it kind of bleeds over into the movies and stuff, that if a movie is weak, it's probably because the writing is weak. So the amazing thing about this intro, with the teen shooting Fi in the chest, it tells you so much about their characters, that they're just like, hey, let's see what happens. Let's test our new armor. But it also sets up for later something that Fi does that really is the test of that armor, and that you wonder, like, would he still have done had they not done this test early on? So it's a very interesting thing to think about. So they do that, and Niner comes in and he's all grumpy. What are you doing? And they're like, oh, just want to see if the Kataran armor really holds up like they say it does. And it does. We're good. So then they get called into this hostage situation. So they're on Coruscant at this point, 000. And there is a hostage situation at spaceport involving a senator. So it's really high profile. The senator's name is Mina something. So I'm dying because I'm like, that's our OC's name.
I snorted. I was like, oh God, that's me. Oops.
There you are. They're going to save you.
I was like, what the hell was I doing?
And just another character moment that I loved on the way to the hostage situation, and Fi is leaning out the gunship or the transport and just like in awe of Coruscant, the city. And it's so precious. Just, you know, how much it's just interesting to him, and he wishes he could get out and see it, and, you know, hopes that he has a chance to before he dies. Like, that's always in the back of their mind is, you know, we could die on any one of these missions. It's so sad, but yet it motivates their characters so much. It's very interesting.
Actually sticky noted that because I was just dying. You know me and my sticky notes. I love sticky notes, and I was just dying of laughter because Fi, you know, like you said, he was leaning out. Fi leaned a little further out, trusting the safety harness. Don't you think it's amazing? Yeah, every rotten stinking shift, said the pilot wearily. Get him back in board, will you? Niner jerked on the line. Fi, don't frighten the civvies, he said. It's not nice.
Oh, exactly. Like tourist kind of thing. It's so relatable, like being in LA and you bring somebody in who's from out of town and they're just like, wow. And you're like, it's stupid and stinky. Like, who cares? So it was very relatable and adorable. Mark says this book needs to be its own movie. 100% agree. And that's what I had hoped when they announced Clone Wars, the TV show, that it would be in the spirit of this, that it would follow these characters and it would be this thing. And unfortunately it wasn't, which is why I will never watch that show. But
watch it.
Can it even get close to the quality of this? I wonder.
I mean, you know, it has its ups and downs. It has definitely a lot of differences, which I noted in my notes as I was reading.
And I would like to hear your perspective on that as someone who hasn't watched the show, because I'm so bitter that it decanonized my favorite books. I would like to know what they took and if they made anything better, or if you felt like certain things are presented stronger in the books or not. We don't have to get into it right now, but if that is a comparison you want to make, I would be interested to hear it, especially when we get into the Null arcs, aka the original Bad Batch. So very interested to hear that. So moving on in targets, they get there. We meet Commander Obram, who is the head of the Senate Guard. He comes up later in the actual novel. So right now we're still in the short story, of course. He works with them. He's more of on the civvy side because he's, you know, Coruscant security, but he gets it. Like, he trusts the clone commanders. He trusts Skirata and everybody. So he's an ally. He's a good guy. So we got him. So Omega's here. They're checking it out. Who arrives? Sergeant Cal Skirata. We finally meet the man, the myth, the legend. And who's he coming up with? Jedi Master Kim, who's, sorry, you know, not belong to this world.
R.I.P.
Senate Head of Public Affairs, Mar Rugayan, who we'll meet again later in the novel. He's kind of a douche, but it turns out to be helpful.
Can I just say, he reminds me of what? Oh God, I'm drawing a blank on her name. The Kardashian, Kris Jenner. She reminds me of Kris. He reminds me of Kris Jenner.
I could see that. It's all about the publicity. Yes, that's exactly it. Oh my gosh. Marcus says Lost Stars live action series. Yes. Please. Yes. Could that be a Disney Plus series? Please make something. There's such good novels. I would love to see live action version of these novelizations. The really good ones. I tell you what. And lastly, arriving on the scene, Ordo. The main Null arc. So in this series, the Null arcs, so their arcs, so Advanced Recon Commandos, or whatever the acronym stands for. Yeah, exactly. Advanced Recon Commando. Yeah. And the Null arcs are ones, they were a batch that was not very compliant. Null meaning not useful. They were going to be exterminated. We'll find out a little bit more about that when we get to the novel. So right now, here we go, null arc. The Omega sees him, and they're like, oh no, that's one of those guys. They're kind of wacky. Okay, so negotiations start. The Jedi goes in, right? Takes a cam with him, is trying to keep it hidden. Oh no, it gets caught. The terrorists are in there. They freaking kill the Jedi, toss his body out the door. Thinking Omega goes up to check it out. They're poking around. Boom, timer. Niner's like, it's counting down, get out of here. What does Phi do? He freaking pulls a Steve Rogers, okay? He jumps on that effing grenade, covers it with his newly tested Katarn Mark III armor. Boom, he's on it. It explodes, takes the full blast with his own body, basically saves everybody in the immediate area. Right? So, oh my gosh, and you're like, did he make it? What happened? We get to a little time skip. He's fine. But we find out that this action has really made an impact on the Coruscant security men that were there, and they're like, wow, what a move. And Ordo, the null arc, he was really impressed with that. Like, that is a major loyalty kind of move. And so now he really likes Phi, which is the most adorable bromance in the world. I love them.
I love it. I die every time, like, I read anything about it. I'm like, they're so cute. Like, just the friendship, the amount of trust and loyalty they have for each other, which I know we'll talk more about later, but I just need to say, I love it so much.
Yeah, so this is where it all begins. And it comes up a lot again when we get into the novel, in that the Nulls are very insular. They like each other, and they don't connect very well with other brothers so much. But this action of Phi jumping on this grenade to save everybody has really made an impact on Ordo. Now he likes him, even though Phi is the most like irreverent, and he's just like, he'll make fun of anybody, and he's already insulted Ordo's skirt, like his comma. And but now he's okay. Like, now, like, he's all right in Ordo's book, and that is a beautiful thing. So we get through some just negotiations and threats. We see that the head of public affairs, Mar Rugayan, he kind of uses like he calls Phi a grunt, even though he's giving a compliment. He's like, yeah, the grunt was really good. Skirata does not like that. He grabs him by the balls, and he's just like, don't you ever refer to my boys as that ever again. So this action, there's a lot of press around, is really the first that a lot of Coruscanti citizens are seeing of the clone troopers. That becomes a huge theme later in the novelization, is that they're so far removed from the war that the clones are alien to them. They're just faceless armor. And so, but now they're seeing them a little bit in action through the Holo News, watching this event. And even the head of public affairs is just like, freaking clone trooper. But he's learning his lessons. Like, they're all learning some lessons here. So negotiations happen. Cal Skirata volunteers to go in and see what's what. And thank goodness he does, because he kind of catches on to something's not right here. And the boys know to listen out to what he's doing, because they're all about to bust in and like really make this an op. But he's saying some things that are sounding a little suspicious, like he's trying to give them a signal for something, and we don't know what it is. But they've got a job to do, and clones are trained to do a job at, like, bar nothing. Like, nothing should stop them from achieving their mission. No matter who gets in the way, they're going to achieve their mission. Boom, they bust in. Omega Squad, Ordo, everybody storm the building. They see all what they think are the terrorists. One shot, no scope, just kill. Boom, they're dropping like flies. Here comes Phi. He sees one of the terrorists. He's ready to take the shot. Cal jumps in the way. No. It's a hostage. They switched clothes. Phi's fingers already on the trigger. But he stops himself somehow, manages to not shoot, and then registers what Cal says. No, it's a hostage. They switched clothes, and stops. And this haunts him for the rest of the story, that he almost shot his father figure, that he almost would not have hesitated to shoot through him to get the terrorists, because that was his mission, and they do anything that it takes to achieve their mission. And that's how they've been trained. And so, I don't know, it's such an interesting thing as far as the storyline of this short story goes, but also tells you so much about the way they've been raised, the way they view the world, the way they view their purpose, and the things that are important to them. What's more important to him, finishing the mission or a person that he cares about? And in a split second of muscle memory, he had to make that choice. So that was tense as, oh my gosh. I was like, dang. And he felt so bad about it afterwards. I'm like, poor Fi.
My heart started breaking because I could just feel his emotions. And I was like, my poor sweet boy.
I know. So the short story is told mostly from Fi's point of view. And it'll go, like, things are happening, it's winding down, they're cleaning things up, and he'll just keep going back to, I almost shot Cal. I almost shot him. Like, he's still caught up in that, the panic of that moment. And so they're not just brainwashed, trained robots, machine humans. Like, they really feel and have to make decisions. So it was a really interesting moment and a really interesting thing to have to deal with after the fact. So the cutest part is that kind of at the end, Obram, the security commander, invites them all out to drink, and it's like, oh no, we're on duty, we gotta go. But Fi really wants to go get drinks with these guys. He wants his, like, Warrenuts in his drink. So that kind of becomes his motivation. The fact that he got invited out to drinks by civilians, like a chance to go socialize and make friends and hang out with regular people. Like, I don't know, it becomes a driving force for him once we get into the novelization. All he wants to do is get back to Coruscant and go out for drinks with his friends. Like, what a normal thing to want. And to him, it's revolutionary. Like, nobody's ever invited clones out to drink before.
Yeah.
Like, what is this? It was just precious. So that is the event that kind of kicks everything off, that introduces all these characters, that takes place in this short story. So it's called Targets. It's by Karen Travis. It was in Star Wars Insider 81, I think. So if anybody can go find it, there's PDFs online. Or I found it actually at the back of the Legends copy of the novelization. So
it's in the original one too.
Oh, is it? Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, it's at the very back.
Yeah, so it's at the back, but you should read it first. So just so you know, that's a great way to kick it off, to remind yourself who the Omega Squadron guys are and introduce you to Ordo and Cal. So that's a nice little intro. But then we get into the book. We get into the novel 000.
I got my notes.
Got your notes. Got mine. All right, so we begin with an adorable prologue from Fi's journal. And I'm just like, more Fi. Like, Fi all day.
I'm just really loving it because the first book, like, you could tell it was mostly about, like, Darmin's point of view. So I'm excited that this is more about Fi, because I'm like, okay, are the other ones going to be focused on the others' point of views? And I just really like getting more into Fi's mind, because, you know, he's the one always, like, making those, like, wisecracks and the jokes and everything. And so just being able to get, like, a deeper understanding of him and his thought process, I'm like, I'm all for it. Synth mode has been activated. I'm thinking so hard.
He's my favorite for sure. I know we had a hard time picking our favorites from the first novel, but I think I might be biased just because of the arc that he goes on later. And oh my gosh, I can't, like, even in, like, normal chapters in this, when he's being his normal self and suddenly out of nowhere I remember what happens to him in a later novel, I'm just like,
I'm scared.
I know. That's the amazing thing about this, is it introduces a lot of characters.
Yeah.
but each one of them feels so unique and so um, deep. Like every one of them gets fleshed out pretty well and has a different personality, and you end up just loving all of them for different reasons. And I always thought that Fi would be really relatable to you, Jasmine, because he's kind of the dark humor, like, and he gets a little bit more psychologically into it in this one, explaining why he likes to make jokes in stressful situations. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's just like Jasmine talks about every time.
Oh yeah, no, that's definitely me because as I've talked to my therapist about this, I make dark jokes and I use humor as a way to cope. Is it the healthiest? Probably not, but it works for me. So
It works for Fi.
I've been loving Fi more and more, and like most of the sticky notes are like things that he said, and I think it was him or maybe it was Cal. It was one of those two that said they said something along the lines of, you know, you can either let the fear take over or, you know, you can kind of do something about it.
Yep.
And that's like he was using his humor, and I was like, I'm for it. I'm all for it.
Yeah. And we get that in the prologue before the first chapter in Fi's journal about how they're about to go on this mission in kind of a snowy environment. And they've finally been issued that black armor that they were asking for months ago, just in time for a mission on a snowy planet. And all you can do is laugh about it, I guess. So that was adorable. And like his way of kind of, you know, getting into everybody's head before the mission is asking, well, what do you want most right now? And everybody's answers are so telling to their character. You know, Niner wants better gear. I can't remember what a teen said. Darman is missing somebody he doesn't name, but we can have guesses about that. And then Fi just wants to go to Coruscant and get his drink with his friends. So it's like, okay, they're all more experienced. They've lived in the world a little bit longer now, and they're really kind of developing into people. Okay. Before we get into chapter 1, we can answer your question. The Painting of the Next Series Visions. So that's the one that's kind of in an anime style, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like it, and I'm pretty skeptical about most things that are going to be coming out from the current Disney Plus TV show, you know, range. But you get into anime and you can get really creative. And I know that one great thing about anime and why it's so popular right now, more popular than American comics, manga is outselling it by a huge amount, is because Japanese creators are really original, really creative. The things they do is stuff you've never thought about before. Are storylines and premises that are so original and creative that you just need to know what happens. You need to see how this plays out. So if it is treated like that, we could get some really interesting stories and some really unique characters. So I don't know how much of an influence the Lucasfilm Story Group has had on telling them what to put in the show, or if they just let them run wild with their own ideas, which I think will be a better outcome. I think if the Japanese creators have been given free range to do whatever creative vision they have, that it's going to be far more interesting. So I have a slightly more higher hopes for that than I do any of the other shows that are coming out or the movies. What do you think, Jazz? There's been a couple trailers now.
I'm actually really excited. So I'm slowly getting into anime. I have a couple friends and my boyfriend's trying to get me into it because so in the beginning, the animes I've been shown, I'm like, they don't feel original. They're like meh. But growing up, I always liked Dragon Ball Z. I like Avatar: Last Airbender. I love Studio Ghibli. So slowly I've been getting back into it. And when I saw the trailers, I was like, this is going to get me into anime because I love it. It does look original. Like, I think I recognize maybe a few things and everything else is just kind of a mystery. And I really enjoy that. I was like, I want something new. I want something mysterious.
Yep.
The only thing I hope for, I doubt they're gonna do, but I hope for is I want more clones. I want all the clone content.
I didn't see any clones there. The umbrella lightsaber though.
Yes.
I think I did laugh about that. See, people like to think I'm going to take the idea of the lightsaber and I'm going to make something nobody's ever seen with it before, because of that reaction when Darth Maul ignited the second blade and everyone was like, oh my gosh, like it was mind-blowing. And so everyone since then has tried to be like, well, I want to do something unique with a lightsaber, and I hate it. I hate the spinning helicopter lightsabers. I hate the light bows and stuff. Like, stop. Just let a lightsaber be a lightsaber, or two-ended bow staff lightsaber. That's fine.
I do
the
like
umbrella lightsaber was so
it
silly.
It reminds me of Hagrid from Harry Potter, because his wand is the umbrella. So when I saw that, I started laughing. I was like, oh my god, it's Star Wars Hagrid.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't see the need to try to reinvent a lightsaber in so many different ways. Just do something really good with a classic lightsaber, and I'll be happy. I don't need to see it redesigned and gone crazy.
I
So
like the umbrella one. That was clever. I was like, all right.
I was like, oh my gosh. Here we
I
go.
like wacky things, so I was like, why not?
Well, we'll see. It does look like it's from one of the cooler looking episodes. So, you know, I gotta trust. I'll try to trust. So we'll see what they do with it. All right. So to fulfill your clone needs, Jasmine, let's jump into chapter 1, which is a flashback to when Cal first arrives on Commando to take this job that Jango has been offering a bunch of Mandalorians to come and train commandos on this mysterious planet. And they haven't been told that they're clones or human or anything. They're just arriving for this job, but the job pays really well. So well that they've all agreed to give up their identity and show up here and do this job for Jango. Cal's here. He's walking around. He does not like the Kaminoans. Doesn't like them. They're reptilian and cold and emotionless. He doesn't like them. So he gets into the office. They bring in, they're like, oh, well, there's this batch that was bad. They're not very compliant. They're not learning. They're not obeying. So, you know, we want your opinion on it before we recondition them, AKA destroy, like kill this bad batch, basically. And so he's like, yeah, let's see them. So they bring it in. It's like 4-year-old kids. It's like little children. It's 6 little children, little clone children. And Cal is upset. Like, this dude has a heart. He's like a cold-blooded Mandalorian warrior killer. But man, he sees these kids and it does something. We hear a little bit between him and Jango about his past, and he had a family. He had a wife, 2 sons and a daughter, and they weren't Mandalorian. And that's like in this world, the Mandalorian culture is so fleshed out and it's so important. And to not have Mandalorian sons, if you've got sons, is huge dishonor in the culture. And so is that how it is?
I kind of have a complaint about that, because like in these books and in other books and in Rebels even, so in the Mandalorian culture, from what I've gathered, it's supposed to be like all gender neutral. It's supposed to be like men and women are like seen equally, like any kid is a blessing and all that. But then for some reason, like throughout the book, they just keep focusing on guys. And I'm like, so that's why, like, you know, he had a daughter, but the emphasis is on the sons for some reason. So that's
like sometimes it is. And then sometimes it'll be like, at this certain age, you train your sons and daughters.
Yeah.
So like it is, but sometimes it'll only mention the sons. Like that it's really, really important that your son follows in your footsteps. The girl might have a choice, but like it is your duty to bring up your sons in the Mandalorian way. So I don't know. Like sometimes it mentions both, and then sometimes it really emphasizes the sons.
Yeah,
So
that just kind of struck me as odd. I mean, if anyone watching has any examples of more when they do mention women, or if they focus on, like, if you guys have any examples, I'd love to read them in the comments. We would love to see them. But yeah, that's just something that struck me as odd as I kept reading. I was like, okay, at first they mentioned the daughter, and then after that, it's like she doesn't even exist. And I'm just thinking, you know, like, especially in Rebels, how the focus is on sons and daughters. It's both of them. But then for some reason, this book, it's just,
I don't know
like,
if it's because the daughter was the youngest and maybe she wasn't at the age where he should have started training her yet.
well,
And the
he
boys
started
had
at
already
age
passed
10.
that age.
I don't know.
So it was weird. But I don't think that they used this same Mandalorian culture and world building for the shows.
I can
Because
see some of the similarities, but I guess I gotta read more of the book. I feel like in the show they really did keep it more gender neutral than the book, which is kind of weird because she basically built the world, it seems like.
that's what I would like to find out, because this was kind of the first peek into, or the first attempt by an author that I'm aware of at really establishing the Mandalorian culture, giving it a language and values and traditions and all this kind of stuff. And then when they made the show, they maybe took some of these elements, but not all of them. A huge example, and I was going to touch on it later because there was one of the little prologue things before the chapters is about Mandalorians. So maybe we can have this discussion there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there is this like an introduction kind of to the things that are most important to Mandalorians and how Cal Skirata has failed as a Mandalorian to have this legacy that way. And so he's been basically cut off and named as non-existent to his family, his biological family. And now he's taken this job and they're dead to him. The actual family, or he's dead to them one way or another. But now here he is. They bring in these 6 kids that they're saying, you know, well, we're just going to terminate them. Like, they're no good. And him having had sons at a point that he feels that he's failed, he immediately, I don't know, has this paternal sense of responsibility for these kids. Like, and he analyzes them and sees what little warriors they are, how close to Mandalorians they're already becoming, and sees the potential there. So it's so precious. He kind of takes them under his wing and he gets really pissed at the Kaminoan, and they end up in his room and they're scared of lightning. It's so precious. And like the little leader that's trying to protect his brothers, he gives them all names, and he names that one Ordo. So now if you've read the little short story that we covered beforehand, now you know where Ordo came from. He was the little like ringleader of these null clones, this bad batch, if you will. So precious. So yeah, he's just playing dad to them, feeding them, teaching them Mandalorian. Kind of this is his intro into clones as well. How fast they learn, how smart they are, and he sees potential in the fact that these ones don't follow orders, that they think very independently. And that's good for black ops and covert operations and needing to be on your own and make your own calls. So he manages to keep them alive and says, I'll train them myself. And so these are kind of his boys. Like, we know that all the clones that were trained by Skirata love him, but these are his boys. These are his babies, and Ordo's the leader of all that. So that's our guy. Did you have any thoughts on this intro?
So I thought it was interesting how, I did make a note of it, how it talked about how they would chill them down, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I remember Cal was just kind of like, what the hell?
Yeah, because then it jumps forward to he's being called into like a standoff at the
Yeah.
HQ because these guys don't want to go on to chill down. And he's like, you don't understand what they've been through. Of course they don't. Like, let me talk to them.
I just thought it was interesting how they mentioned that, and I remember it in the first book, but I don't remember them actually mentioning anything about chill down in the cartoon. It kind of alluded to they would have downtime, not necessarily leave, but they would have downtime when the ship is in repairs. They would have downtime, between missions, but never actually talked about being chilled down. So I was like, oh, that's right. That's a thing.
Yeah. So it's I don't know. All I think is like Winter Soldier. Just just like stasis, too. Right? So you freeze them, and these guys want nothing to do with it. And so they call Cal in to negotiate because these guys are just in this standoff. The null arcs are like, no, we're not doing that. We're not going to chill down. Forget it. And so they're like, Cal, come talk to these guys. They only listen to you. And he sees it as an opportunity because his contract is over. He trained them. He trained the commandos. He's done. This is 5 days after Geonosis. We find out that Cal wasn't told when they got called out to Geonosis. When that happened, he just woke up one morning, everybody was gone. And it was such a fast deployment. He didn't even get to say goodbye. And he says later, like, he spent 3 days, like, not knowing what to do with himself in this empty Camino with all his boys gone. And so he sees this as an opportunity to negotiate his way back into the army. So he says, oh, you know what, I'll go in there and deal with them if you give me a rank in the army so I can be back with my boys. Like, to him, it doesn't matter what they ask him to do as long as he's with his family. This is his family now. He's completely replaced his actual family, who he's dead to, with these guys. This is everything to him. So I was like,
you could tell really is a family dynamic, because I was cracking up when I read this, but like when he does go in to talk to them, he's like, Ortica, he called. Ordo, you've been a naughty boy again, haven't you? And I'm just like, that's such a dad. That's such a dad right there.
Yeah.
Like,
total dad vibes, this guy.
I was already, so I'm Hispanic, and we have a thing called La Chancla, and I was like, oh my God, he's gonna get that ready.
Could you imagine?
They've all been naughty. I just picture him with the shoe, just ready to laugh.
Some Mandalorian boot, just like, Ordica. Why you tempt me? Oh my God.
No.
I love it. Yeah, I know that one of your favorite things in books is the theme of family or found family or adoptive family. And this is just chock full of it. So
I love it.
Yeah, you're probably in heaven with these.
I really am. Wow. I have a thing for clones and traumatized men, apparently. So.
Well, there we go. So now we've got our intro to Cal. We know who this commander is that they've been talking to or talking about in the first book so much. Now we know kind of how he got his start with the clone army. And then boom, we're back into real time, chapter 2. So we join up with Etain, right? Our Jedi that barely survived the first book, but grew so much. Now she's a full-fledged general in this war, and she's on her gunship, Fearless, and she's got her clone commander, Get, and they're on precious. So they're on their way to evac the 41st. We kind of find out in little clips that they were told to stand down, and she's like, "Nah, sorry, we're doing this. We're going to get the Sarlacc squadrons. We're going."
New comlink who this?
Yeah, exactly. She, from her experience in this first book, is all about saving as many lives as she can of the clones. She does not see them as expendable tools, faceless soldiers. Like, they are people to her, and that is a huge motivation for her. And she is constantly comparing them to Darman. Like, he left such an impact on her that it's always like, what if this was Darman? Like, she wants to save as many lives as she can. it's kind of a neat thing. At the beginning, she's watching the news. She sees news about the bombing at the Coruscant Army base, which we find is later a big plot point. But so she's reading that and she's like, wow, that would be a terrible way to go. Or I think Get says it, and she's like, yeah, well, so's this. As they're heading on in to do this extraction, we find out that her exploits on Kilura with Omega have become kind of a legend among the clone troops, that it's kind of the story of that has spread and everybody knows. And that Ordo is constantly making sure that they keep updated on each other. So anytime there's intel, they're sparing. I know, and I'm like,
what a bro! I love him. I simp for this man. But then again, I simp for like.
I know. I'm like, who don't you though? Like all of them are so lovable. I can't.
Oh yeah.
So she gets, you know, a little update, and it's so precious. I'm just like, oh, she's so good. And then she heads out. She's got her daggum giant concussion rifle still that she learned how to use, and she's just like, she prefers this now instead of the lightsaber unless it's close combat. Amazing. And
I love the mental image of it.
Yes, exactly.
So there's this TikTok video that I've been this TikToker that I've been seeing, and he'll like sorry, this goes a little bit off tangent, but there's a point. So it's this like 2-year-old little baby. She's the cutest thing, and she's, whenever they go grocery shopping, she always has this big ass bag of Doritos that's her size. She doesn't want to let it go. She always has her little Doritos. And for some reason, when they were describing like the big old rifle with the tang, I was like, oh my god, it's Dylan and her Doritos.
Yeah, exactly. It's that mental image of some little girl carrying something that almost is bigger than her, but like insisting on carrying it around. I think at one point it describes it as looking like she's just an attachment on the gun. And
yeah.
Like, so you just get this really vivid mental picture of how big this thing is, and she's just hauling it around like it's nothing because she's a Jedi.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. I love it. So they somebody mentions Cal, and she's like, oh, Cal again. And they're like, oh, you need to meet him. So, you know, like, I can't wait. Like, this man has had an impact on her life, whether either of them know it or not. Like, important people in this universe, like, their paths have to cross. She kind of reflects a little bit on the fact that in the years since Geonosis, this childlike quality that she first sensed when she met the clones for the first time is gone. That they've all been at war for a year, and there is no more like wonder and just naivety about the nature of their generals or who they're fighting or their mission here. That they're just all battle-hardened men at this point, and that they've kind of come to see the reality of the situation. She gives a speech to them, which emphasizes how much she values their lives and makes them take off their helmets, which is probably pretty unusual for them. She wants to see each of them. She can tell the difference between them. And then the speech is over. They're getting ready to head out, and she can hear them singing with each other through Get's helmet, who still got off, I think. And then he puts it on, and she feels kind of cut off from them, but she knows they've got this song that they're singing before they go out. So it's a really interesting bit of culture.
I did make a note of that. Where is it? So I had put that, you know, it was really interesting that we get to see so much culture with clones. They use Mandoa, they use the slang. You know, later on we see more of the culture that they do, and they hold this ideology so much to them. And I was like, we don't get this in the Clone Wars, and that just makes me really sad. Yeah, not all of them are going to be the same as like Cal's boys, who, you know, they really got to learn it firsthand. But something that like I've been in discussions with and read on like Tumblr and all that, everyone's kind of the same thing. We're like, why didn't we get that in the Clone Wars? Why didn't we get to see more of...
It enriched this so much, and it all felt so cohesive. Every new element that Karen introduces as part of the Mandalorian culture that the clones have embraced to kind of give their lives meaning feels like it fits with every other part that we knew about before. It began with little things like the language, and the next thing we know is like they've got these songs to kind of get them into battle mode, and then eventually dances, and then certain things that they value in the way they talk to each other or treat each other, insider and outsider attitudes. It all just builds and builds and builds and creates this really rich world building that I loved. And I'm telling you, before I started reading these books, I didn't care anything. I was like, Mandalorians are like the least interesting part about the Star Wars universe to me, and clones are even probably less than that. And then I read these books and I was like, oh, Mandalorians are so cool and the clones are amazing. Like, I love them. And then they were like, oh, wait, no, none of this counts anymore. We're doing a kids' TV show and the characters are all hideous.
Because, like, don't get me wrong, I love the Clone Wars. I do have my issues with it. Some of my friends that I've talked to about this can hear me rant on for ages. Even though I love this show, nothing is perfect, and it's okay to complain about things you like. So I think one of my new complaints about it is they could have at least included some Mandoa. They could have done some things from this book, you know, just show that they're still in tune at least a little bit with their culture. Because at the end of the day, even if they are clones, they're still Mandalorians. You know, Cal made sure to remind them, like, you guys are still Mandalorians.
Yeah, that became an important thing, is that they weren't just clones. He wanted them to all feel like they were actually Mandalorians.
Yeah.
That clones wasn't their main thing. They were part of a bigger culture that has existed for thousands of years. So, yeah, I adore this world building, and every new thing she introduces, this singing, I love it. And I love what it does for the clones and the Mandalorians and for Etain, that it kind of gives her this new edge of like, I care so much about these people and I'm so excluded from them though. Like, I would die to protect them, but yet I'm not one of them. Like, I don't know what it's like to be in this brotherhood, and they aren't going to accept me like that. I'm a general. I'm a Jedi. I'm completely different. And we get a lot of the comparisons between Jedi and clones and how they view each other and feel sorry for each other, which is actually part of the next section. So we've got Ordo now, jump to Coruscant, busting into a meeting that he's not supposed to. No, don't disturb, please. Ordo's like, screw that. I'm gonna do what I want. He busts in to get Barda and Jisik. So we kind of had been introduced to him very, very briefly in the first book. And now we find out a little bit more through mentions that like he is obsessed with the clones and the Mandalorian culture that the clones exhibit. And he's really interested in learning all about it and being part of it and being liked by them. So he's kind of one of the Jedi that these guys really trust. So Ordo likes him because Cal likes him. So Ordo busts into this meeting to get him. We've got like a non-null ARC. So one who was trained by Jango, like a really traditional ARC trooper, Captain Maze. He does not like that Ordo just disrespected his meeting. He challenges him and gets punched in the face for his troubles. So, you know, it's one of those boy Mandalorian things where it's just like, you know what? I don't have time to talk to you. The one thing you do understand is violence, though, so I'm just going to break your nose and leave. And so he does. So they're piloting, or like he lets Jisik pilot, and so they're on the speeder bike going, and they have this interesting conversation about like, why do you accept me? Why do you like me? Well, Cal likes you. He likes you because you respect our culture. You actually find it legitimate and respect it and are interested in it. And let's see, a little bit of comparison, because Ordo asks, like, do you remember being taken from your family? Probably something that the clones could find in common with Jedi is like not having parents, not having a family, and having to kind of bond with the people you were raised with. So that was a really interesting comparison. Does the Clone Wars ever have Jedi and clones talk about that comparison? Do they ever view each other that way?
Not that I remember, but something that I did find kind of, I don't know if interesting is the right word, but something that I noticed was, so Ordo asked, you know, just like you said, do you remember being taken? And Jessica says, yes, I remember being taken, but I remember in the Clone Wars, and I think some other pieces of like literature or text where the Jedi don't take the children. They, so with each like species and homeworld, they talk to them and they're like, is it okay if we come talk to the individual families when the child is of age, if we notice that they, you know, possess, you know, force sensitivity, you know, that stuff. So like, it's always consensual. And like, there's even some species that are like, no, you can never have our force sensitive children, that are like, cool, that's fine. And like, you know, they give the parents time with their child before they bring them to the temple. So I was like, oh, this is kind of a harsher way of saying it, or a harsher thought process. I was like, that's interesting, but I mean, if it gives them something to bond over with, I get it. But usually, like,
Yeah, things were different back in the Legends days.
Yeah, from what I remember in the Clone Wars, they don't really talk about that. The most they talk about is the clones being like, Camino is our home. It's home. It's home. It's home. That's what they keep saying. I don't remember them really saying anything quite
like
else
trying to
about
bond
that.
over that commonality.
No, there's bonding, but in other ways, not necessarily over things like that. So that's why reading this, I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So they get to they arrive at the explosion site, this explosion that Tane had been reading about on the news. And here they are. It was an army base. Clones were killed in the explosion. They're trying to figure it out. Who's there working on it? Obram, our dude from the short story. Yes, good to see him again. I liked that he referred to, when the Jedi show up, he referred to them as the Mystic Mob. He's like, oh yeah, I might as well bring the Mystic Mob. I don't know, like little things like that, like certain factions having nicknames for other factions makes the world feel so like lived in and rich, and kind of tells you how these people view those people. And I just love that in like one short little phrase, in like just a little word, a nickname, you learn so much about these characters and these different organizations and how they interact. So I really liked that. It makes it feel like really real, I guess. And then we get like a little bit of Jedi action, because Jessic goes in and kind of meditates around the scene, sees what he can feel from the events there. And it's really interesting. And he's kind of feeling the emotions that are lingering, and determines that there was never any like malice actively on the scene. And so the enemy, whoever the bomber is, was never actually there. So boom, first clue is like, this must have been remote somehow. So now we skip to Omega Squadron, our boys. Finally. This is the mission that they've been called off to go tackle, which is some of the Null Arcs had gotten a lead on the terrorists that possibly committed this bombing, and they know that they're in possession of a hijacked freighter, and they're heading towards this one hyperspace jump point. And so we've got Omega in place, waiting at the jump point for this freighter to show up so that they can ambush it and get these terrorists, right? So they're kind of hanging out in this ship. They've got a clone pilot in there. We find out that Phi, hey, Paro. We find out that Phi hates zero-G missions. It makes him sick. He doesn't like it, but he's dealing with it by making jokes like he normally does with their pilot Sicko, who he really admires, because he's just really skilled at what he does, and pilots are just really good. I mean, I love pilots too, so like,
he's like, I wonder
can
why
relate.
they call him Sicko. Oh, that's why.
Oh, now I get it. I loved it. So yeah, this is kind of where we find out that Ordo really likes Phi now, and all the other ones are teasing him about it. Like, oh, your new friend, fine, go hang out with him. And that the other Republic commandos call the Null Arcs the Bonkers Squad.
I live for that. Like, I want Bunker Squad on a t-shirt because I just absolutely live for it.
Yeah.
And when they were talking about that, that did start to make me feel like, okay, yeah, these are like the Bad Batch, except the difference is Camino was like, oh, we made a mistake with the Knolls, versus the Bad Batch where they on purpose enhance their abilities. So I was like, okay, difference starts, but they're kind of ending up in the same place, and I really like that because I remember when like we were first introduced to the Bad Batch, they were just kind of like
this is it. This is sorry, my stinking ring light. Republic Commander 000. That's what we're going over right now. We're currently recapping chapter 2. So this is actually book 2 from the Republic Commando series. This one is where you get introduced to, like Jasmine was just talking about, the OG Bad Batch.
Yeah.
So the Null Arcs, which was a really early on batch of clones that had really bad obedience problem, and so they were just going to dispose of them. And then the sergeant's like, no, let me train them. Like, this could be a useful quality about them. Let's see what I can do with it. So I guess, yeah, because having not watched the Bad Batch, so that's not what the Bad Batch is in the Bad Batch show.
Their enhancements were done on purpose versus here where they were like, we just want to get rid of them. So that's why they were called like the experimental group. But people know them like, they're like, oh, that's a weird squad. They're bonkers. Like, they would just they would see them the same. So what the Bad Batch calls the regs, so the regular troopers, would see them as, you know, all the other troopers would see the Knoll. So I was like, okay, I like that. I like the similarity in it.
Yeah, it is kind of really telling about the relationship between the really traditional clone squads that view, like, that really value their reliability and the quality of their training and all this kind of stuff. And then they look at these Knolls who are really independent and don't obey orders and are kind of just unpredictable and have kind of a negative nickname, the Bonkers Squad. Like, they don't.
I'm here for it. I still want that on a t-shirt.
I love it. I mean, it just tells you so much about the relationship, even between different batches of clones and how they view each other based on their qualities and the way they were raised. Even though they were all brought up by Cal, they're still like, yeah, but those ones are kind of crazy. So, like, okay, the Knolls do their thing. Those are bonkers. And they're all like, oh, fi, like, the bonkers guy likes you now. Like, you must be crazy too. Fine. But then we get a little drop of drama where somebody mentions that, oh, Sergeant Val is back, Waylon Val, right? And that was, we know, Atine, who is the one member of this squad who wasn't trained by Sergeant Scarada, was trained by Sergeant Val. And so there's some drama going on there because he reacts very strangely to the news that Val is kind of back on the scene, because we find out that once everyone shipped off to Geonosis, these Mandalorian trainers, their job was done. They're over, they're gone. And Scarada managed to stick around, as we saw, because he negotiated his way back into the army. Val was gonzo, done. Like, his contract was over.
Honestly, my heart dropped when the sudden shift and change. I was like, something bad happened. I don't even know Waylon Val, and I'm ready to fight him. I'm
right?
Don't hurt my poor sweet Atine.
You're like, what did you do to Atine?
You're like,
hate
I'm
you now.
coming for you. I'm coming for you.
And then poor innocent Fi is just like, oh, something's going on here. Like, what is this? Maybe I shouldn't, bother him about it. Okay, so there's this hint that there's some drama there. Interesting. Let's keep an eye on that. And then we get Fi just like listening to music in his own helmet, and everyone's like, what are you listening to? He's like, you want to listen to? Like, I just love the way they use their tech in a lot of these scenes, and it uses these funny things to set up a bit about the character, but also to kind of train you on what their tech is capable of. So that later in a battle scene, you're like, oh, okay, they can do that, and they can do that. They can switch between channels and this and that. It's very clever.
For that, because it was so funny. Because he's like, "What are you listening to?" He's like, "Oh, Moncal opera." He's like,
opera?
"I saw you nodding along to the beat."
called him out. He's
And
always
in my head,
defaults
I'm
to
just
opera.
thinking, like, he's listening to metal or something.
I
to
totally
go
believe it.
along.
He's like, yeah, battle music, which is I love it because my brother says the same thing. He was in the army, and he once told me, he's like, here's my playlist of like metal music that I used to listen to right before going out on a mission in like Iraq. And it's like, you know, right before the convoy left, I would be listening to this. This is my pump me up music. And I'm like, oh my gosh, even the clones do it. It's amazing. So he's sitting there and he's listening. He's like, and I love when he invites Sicko. He's like, do you want to listen in? And he's like, no, but thank you for asking.
So cute.
So sweet. So then, boom, here comes the freighter. The freighter comes in to the spot, comes out of hyperspace. They're like, maybe this is the one. Let's go. So they're like approaching it. Oh no, it's the wrong one. It starts turning. The fin catches them. Boom. Oh no, hull breach. It's all crazy. It's spinning. And then he releases the big red button. Boom. Hull sealing foam. I love it. I love this tech. I'm like, that makes so much sense. Of course, ships would have that. That's great. Settles everything down. Okay, boom. That's got to be the right freighter. Let's go capture that. So they make contact. I mean, this is where it really becomes like a legit mission, and everybody's like on point and they're focused and they're doing their job. And I love Karen's writing through these parts because you could so easily get lost in the acronyms and the terminology of this like military SEAL type operation, and yet it feels so tense and action packed and real. Like I can exactly imagine what each of them are doing and how fast they're moving and how their focus has shifted from this pre-battle stage where they were kind of chit-chatting and teasing each other and all this kind of stuff, and now it's like on point, like we're in the zone, let's go. So boom boom boom, they attach to the hull, breach the hull, they get inside, they catch the prisoners. All of a sudden, losing pressure on the ship, there's a hull breach, all the air gets sucked out, prisoners gone, ship's gone. Luckily their armor is with space resistant, so they're okay, but they're checking it out and they're like, oh, we got to get into the cockpit, maybe there's air in there, maybe there's not. So now you've got this dilemma, like, well, if we're wrong about this, we could die.
Yes.
But let's take the chance. We got to get these prisoners. They might know something about this terrorist bombing, and that's the mission, and that's more important than getting out safely. So they're gonna blast the control box to trigger the bulkhead to slam down, hopefully trap some atmosphere in them with the cockpit and go in. They're hoping this works. But we leave it on that cliffhanger and skip to chapter 3. Back with Etain, who has been given a message saying, abandon this extraction, like, don't, you know, it's not important, we need you on something else. And she replies with MRU, which is much regrettable, unable, or much regrets, unable, which is like a very polite reply. So it comes across as sarcastic. And she doesn't realize that. She thought that was like a legit acronym to send back. So we could tell she's come so far, but she's still learning. She's still not the perfect general, but she's trying so hard to learn this lingo. Yes, this is during the Clone Wars. So this is
367 days after Geonosis.
Exactly. So this is the height of the conflict, but this is from Legends. So this is completely decanonized. This was written before the Clone Wars was ever even pitched as a TV show. This was what I always grew up believing the Clone Wars was about before the cartoon came out. And so I prefer this version, actually. But that's what we're kind of going over this to see what the difference is. The characters that we're dealing with. This is not Obi-Wan and Anakin, Ahsoka. This is completely new characters, but I love them. I love them, love them. So we've got our Jedi, who, I don't know if you want to say this is the Ahsoka of the series, but she started out as a Padawan who was not the best Jedi, who was almost a failed Padawan. And in dealing with the clones, learned how to get confidence and lead. And now we see her a year in, and she's still not perfect. She's still making mistakes. She still feels like an outsider with them as desperately as she wants to be a good leader and take care of her clones. So it's just this subtle little thing that she replies with the wrong acronym. Like, it still means the same thing, but it's got an attitude, which is almost funny. Like, that would almost make her sound more badass if she meant to do the sarcastic reply, but she didn't. So they're getting in to extract the 41st, right? She's turned down the order to leave them. She's going to go in and save them. She doesn't care. So here they come. They're coming on in. She's with her sergeant, Clanky, on this. She jumps 10 meters out of the gunship with her stinking concussion rifle and lands down there like a crazy woman and like her squad all rappels down ropes and lands. But like, so every once in a while you get this glimpse of like the hardcore Jedi that she has become. She's not like this helpless little girl anymore. She really is toughened up. But I just love that image of her just jumping 10 meters out of the gunship with her rifle and just like, all right, let's blow some tinnies up. Let's go. So they advance. They're holding off the droids, trying to get the extraction of the other units. Finally, the gunship's filling up. The droids are on them, and Clanky's like, "Oh my gosh, they're here!" Boom, not hand to hand, like close quarters combat. She's got her lightsaber out. We can see the warrior that she's become now with a lightsaber. She's slicing through droids. She's in like a battle mode. So her and Clanky are tearing through them. Finally, the gunship's full. Let's get back. They run back, have this moment. I don't know. There's this really good moment where Clanky pulls off his helmet. They look at each other, and it describes it like it's looking into a mirror. They both have this shocked expression of, how the heck did we just survive that? Like, that was crazy. Like, there's this connection there.
That was really nice being able to read that when she described it as being a mirror, because it's like two people, two totally different worlds. But just like in the first book, when they talk about shared trauma, like they're able to connect because of what they both have to face. Doesn't matter their upbringing, doesn't matter, how they were trained or not. They have this shared trauma. They have these shared experiences that's bringing them together.
Yeah. So she has this moment of connection with that they had this shared experience of making it through this crazy situation. And as much as I love Karen's writing and action scenes, they always feel so intense, and you can just picture it and you feel it. Then we get this quiet moment of Attain going around the ship and dealing with all the soldiers that they picked up, that they just rescued and evac'd. And they're injured, they're dying, they're triaged, into different modes. And she comes across one who is triaged as like, don't even bother, like this one's not going to make it. And this is why I had to post that one with the tissue. I had to stop for a cry break right here. And this one's name was Phi. And I was like, I can't. You guys, you have to read this book. The description of her coming across this dying clone, knowing that he's not going to make it, and she's vowed like not to use force mental tricks on clones anymore. Like she did a little bit, she dabbled in it a little bit, and she's just like, no, it's not respectful, I'm not going to do it. But this time she's like, I know I can use it to release some dopamine into his system to ease the pain at least. And she's sitting there and she's just holding him until he passes. And oh my gosh, I can't.
There was a part that I did sticky note. I think she was talking to Get, and he said, but you won't change anything by blaming yourself. And she said, no, you're right, but I won't change anything by pretending I have no responsibility either. And I was like, oh shoot, that hit me hard.
Yeah.
Really hard.
And it makes you wonder what some of the other Jedi generals are doing at this time, and how maybe differently they're treating their units and their commander. They're just like, it's just clones. And so you can tell that like the relationship is different when Etaine's in command, that they all kind of like appreciate how she treats them and that she takes that responsibility over their lives and feels it. Like she was there with this soldier as he died. And oh my gosh, it was such a moment. And then to go from that to she gets this sharp notion that Darmin's in trouble. Like she's constantly aware of him. Like they have a special connection. And so cut that scene, like boom, cliffhanger. Then we skip back over to Coruscant. We're with Scarada, Ordo, and Obram, and they're reviewing satellite footage of a delivery truck showing up to the bombing site. And so we know, yes, this was actually a remote bombing. Nobody's running from it. Nobody was actually on site to trigger it. So Josek's intuition earlier that the enemy was never here is correct. So interesting. Okay, we've got our next clue. It's got to be somebody with either satellite footage or something. So then Scarada is going around. He's asking the Celestin text to give him the ID bars from the armor of the dead soldiers. And we had Etain ask a little earlier, what do you do with the dead bodies? And they're like, don't worry about it. So now we're kind of getting another clue from a different scene. The bodies don't matter. Like it's about this duty that they had. It's about their armor. It's about their uniform, basically. It's their dog tags. That's what we collect. It doesn't matter.
It hurt, and it just made me think of ARC Trooper 5s from the Clone Wars. So for those of you who've seen it, you guys know 5s, would always be like, I know I have my duty to do, but me and my brothers, we matter. We're not just clones. And so his biggest thing is, we are not just numbers. Like there's a whole arc about that. I think it's like 3-4 episodes, the Umbara arc. And it just it just made me think of like him and his whole speech about like we're more than this. And it just made me so sad for them. Like, I mean, I love getting the inside. I love getting to know these clones. But at the end of it, I just get so sad because we all know what happens. And I'm just like, so many of them, like, we get to know and love these men.
Yep.
And they're just reduced to nothing. And so reading that, it felt like a slap to the face.
Oh, I know. We get kind of the human side of them and their personalities and what they care about and what they're afraid of. And that, I mean, even that scene earlier where Phi gets space sick when he's in 0G and the others don't. Like, there are unique qualities to them that really humanizes them. So yeah, it is kind of heartbreaking. Cal's going around and collecting basically the dog tags. Like, this is important. This is why he cares so much about this seemingly insignificant bombing in the HQ at Coruscant, because it took out his men. Like, it took out clone soldiers. Like, this can't be allowed. Yeah. So they got to get to the bottom of this. That's why it's so important for Omega to finish this mission, because this could be the only lead they have, is these terrorists that they may now have in custody and whatever information they have. So it's really important that Omega brings back these terrorists that they've captured. But as we know, they are now on a completely decompression ship with limited airtime, and they're about to blow the power. So what's going to happen? But here we are. We're at the scene of the bombing. They get the Red Zero distress cry. So this is Omega sending out this distress signal saying, we need immediate pickup. Like, it's critical that somebody get here ASAP to extract us, or not even us, the prisoners that we've just captured. They have important intel. So they get the Red Zero call. They get them on the holo, and so they're watching live. Basically, Omega's live streaming to Cal and Ordo as they blow the cockpit to get in there to get the terrorists. They got him. They watch it get him. And then, thank goodness, there's oxygen in there. Okay, so we've actually bought ourselves at least a couple hours for somebody to get there. We've got our witnesses that we can interrogate now. Okay, looking good, as long as somebody can get there in time to get them. Ordo's watching this. He's thinking, it finally clicks. He realizes there's a mole somewhere in the army operations. Somebody is selling us out. So now this is on his mind. Boom, jump back to Fearless. So we're with Etain back on her gunship, or no, the gunship is now docked with the Fearless. She's still wandering around. She doesn't want to go to bed. She's, trying to take care of these clones. She feels really sorry for them, that this is what they do, that they're never going to have a life outside of this, that this is the only thing that's important to them, that they were born and bred and trained for this, and they're going to die before they ever do anything else. And yet she sees how strongly bonded they are, this rich culture that they have, this sense of purpose that they have. And as much as she's tried to be important to them, she realizes she's irrelevant to them, that they're good at what they do. They don't need her. And so it's this weird and heartbreaking dynamic for her, that is, as much as she has tried to improve herself, they're still better. They were still created for this purpose, and she will never be able to live up to that. And so she feels sorry for them, and yet she envies them. So it's very interesting. She meets one clone named Nye and gives him her water, which she realizes she has probably less possessions than most, maybe slightly more than a clone. All she's got is water and her lightsabers. And she gives him her water, and she kind of gives this speech expressing sympathy and solidarity with him, which later Get says is the most important thing to them, is when somebody shows solidarity, that actually matters. The other clones are listening and they applaud. I felt like, as much as I praise Karen's writing, that this was kind of a bit of a cheesy moment.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest, it made me kind of uncomfortable. She could have honestly just said, I'm sorry you're hurt, here's the water. But like the whole speech, it kind of felt like a white savior moment. And I was like, no, please do not diminish Etain's character. She can love the clone, she can be all for it, but you don't need to do the savior crap to go with it, because then that just...
Exactly, like the impassioned speech, and then everybody clapped. I was like, it's a little cringe.
That made me very uncomfortable. I was like, I love the other more subtle ways that she shows that she cares, because when you overdo it at that point, it just doesn't even feel genuine. So I was like, Etain, just shut up and sit with him if you have to, but don't do that. And then the fact that they clapped, I was like, I don't think they would actually clap. It
felt a little weird.
Yeah, it was just very uncomfortable. It felt very forced, and I was like, oh, Etain, please don't.
Yeah, so I think this was a weak point in the what we've read so far. I felt like it was kind of retreading some of the same themes and character moments that we'd already witnessed in her last scene with the clones. So it kind of felt a little unnecessary and a little bit cringe. And almost, it wouldn't have been a meme at the time, and then everybody clapped is a meme now. And so I was like, oh no, she just did a meme. Terrible. So yeah, I was like, I could have done without that whole scene. But there it was, it happened. So finally Get is like, quit embarrassing yourself, go to your room, get some sleep.
I loved her and Fi when she was just there, quiet comfort.
Yeah.
Perfect. This speech, so unnecessary. I'm like,
relax. It's like, it almost didn't need to be said. Like, we understand this is how she feels.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was an odd addition that didn't tell us anything new. So it felt unnecessary. So if I were the editor, I would have cut this part.
Yeah.
Just saying. So she finally is forced to go back to her room, go to the refresher, and go to sleep. And she's awakened by this sharp sense of distress for Darman. Like, something's wrong. She goes back out to the bridge, and Get is like, oh, hope you don't mind, but I overrode your orders. We're responding to a Red Zero call. And she's like, no, that's good. We should definitely respond to Red Zero calls. He's like, oh, by the way, it's from Omega. And she's like, oh, shoot. So you're like, yes! Freaking Omega's in trouble. And Etain, General Turmucken is friggin' speeding her way to their rescue. So I'm like, yes, do this, girl. Let's get these boys out of there. Love it. So then we skip to chapter 4, which begins with they're all in the cockpit. They're trying to waste some time. We get the adventures of Fi and his duct tape, which I was dying. I'm just like, I love this so much.
That's such a dad thing. That just made me laugh. I was like, that's such a dad move right there.
He's like offering everybody tape to solve all the problems, and it does.
I can't reiterate how much I love this man. Like, I would probably do something dumb like that. Like,
he literally wraps them up in the blanket with the duct tape.
I would do something like that. I'd be like, here, do you want this? Do you want this? Do you want this? I know it works. And I know you and Sexy Leader would just be like, stop. And I'd be like,
oh my gosh, you and this tape. And then he's like, oh, Atine, you want this for the tools? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's actually works really well. So I was just like, I love this duct tape moment. I love that Atine is up there doing what Atine does, and he's taking things apart, and he's hacking, and or slicing, whatever he's doing. He's trying to get into the information. Meanwhile, Darman's like sort of sleeping, but he keeps getting startled and says he feels like there's someone next to him. And I'm like, oh, love it. So it's this quiet, they're killing time, but you get so much of each of their personalities in the interaction. They open the holo feed with Ordo and Cal again. Cal insists on keeping it live and open so that he can watch for the next couple hours. Like, neither of them are doing anything, but he just wants to kind of be there with them just in case something goes wrong, like just to be there for them. It was so adorable. I loved it. And then they find out that among the people that are responding to their request is Delta Squad. You're like, what does that mean, Delta Squad? Oh, we find out Delta Squad. So a lot of the squadrons of commandos got one or two, or people, like many people got killed in the original squads. So they all got mixed and matched and put together in other squads like Omega has. So they weren't all together originally. Delta Squad is one of the very few that all 4 of their dudes managed to stay alive and have stayed alive together through the entire past year since Geonosis. So they're one of the few that's still an OG squad of 4 that were raised, trained together, and have all stayed alive this whole time. So they're kind of cocky. They
also really remind me of Bad Batch. So like Delta Squad and the Null Arcs both have qualities that whenever I read about either of them as a group, I'm like, okay, I can see where the inspiration for Bad Batch came from. I feel like they really did come from both of them.
Interesting. So I went on Tumblr, as I normally don't, just to see if I could find some good memes that wouldn't be spoilery for you. For some reason, every Republic Commando thing on there is about Delta Squad. I don't know why everybody loves Delta Squad.
Oh yeah, everyone's obsessed with them.
They're obsessed with them. So all we've heard right now is their name. Delta Squad's on the way, and we hear these guys' reaction. Oh no, not Delta Squad. Oh, everybody hates them. They're so annoying. Why do they got to get here first in their stupid captured Nemoidian ship? So we're like, oh, what's this going to be about? And then Cal mentions again Val to Atine, and he's like, don't worry about it, son. I'm going to deal with him. So now we've realized Cal has kind of adopted Atine into his boys. Like, because he's part of Omega Squadron, he's like, I don't care that I wasn't your sergeant. Like, you're one of mine now. And if Val tries to bother you, leave it to me. So we're like, ooh, Cal's in on this drama history too. Interesting. What's going on here? So a team finally hacks the information from the ship, sends it to Ordo. Ordo leaves to go check it out. And then we get kind of a ticking clock. We get the countdown to the rescue. We realize Delta's going to arrive first, then Fearless, and then Majestic. All these ones responding. Then, boom, all of a sudden, they realize there's a Separatist ship on the way too, who's going to arrive very shortly after Delta. So is Delta going to have time to get Omega and the prisoners out of the ship before the Seps arrive to blow them to pieces? Because the Nemoidian ship that Delta has no weapons, no defense. So drama, ticking time bomb, tension. It's all getting set up here, and I'm dying. So then we cut back to Fearless. We've got Etain and Get are aware that there's a SEP ship on the way that's going to get there before they do, and they're like doing anything they can to increase their speed to try to catch up to them, which they are doing slowly, but it's gonna be just by a hair if they manage to make it. Etain calls Delta, and she likes to call the clones by their names. She's talking to Boss. So we finally get to meet one of the Deltas, and so she's talking to him, and he's like, do you want us to get Omega out first or the prisoners? And then here we are. Etain's got to make a leadership decision. She's got to make a general decision. Like, do we rescue these terrorists basically at the expense of the lives of clones so that we can get information out of them and possibly stop future attack on clones? Or do I say, screw the prisoners, screw the terrorists, rescue the squad that I love the most? Like, oh, that is tough. That is tough. And she makes a call, extract the prisoners first. So that was hard. That was tense. That was hard to read. And then the action goes down. Delta arrives. I freaking love the banter. Like, she writes dialogue so well.
I think that's what most of my sticky notes are, like
all
the banter.
The banter between like Scorch and Fi as he's trying to get through. Like, oh my gosh, I was dying. So yeah, and you can tell that Delta's just so cocky that they just think they're better than all the other clones. You really get a sense of their personality and their like squad dynamic. So they're breaking in, and they're like, everybody's kind of cool under pressure because they're not through the windshield yet when the Separatist ship arrives, and they're just like, oh, well, hang on, something's gonna happen.
Their banter kills me. Like when Niner was like, you've been sightseeing, and Boss is like, sorry, we had to stop and ask for directions. And when Scorch was working on like blowing up that little part, and Boss is like, we haven't got a minute. He's like, what do you want me to do? Chew through it? And
Chew through it?
Not the time.
No.
Amazing, but not the time.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Like that they're just cracking jokes the whole time as this other ship is closing in on them to blow them up. Like, I'm dying. I was like, I love these squads so much. But all the action's going down. The SEP is on the way. It's gonna fire, but then boom, Fearless comes out of hyperspace just in time, times their torpedo perfectly so that it flies off, blows up the SEP ship just out of range that Delta and Omega are safe. Delta manages to extract prisoners first. I love that he goes, you gift wrapped them for me. Oh, space blankets. And Darman's like struggling with the stupid Nikto guys, like trying to give him a black eye and everything. Oh my gosh. So they shove him through the tube, get up into the ship, and then we get this moment of tension. We realize Delta Squad has been trained by Val. These are Val's guys, and they know Etain, and there's some history here. They know something about him that the Omega boys don't, and Sev in particular is giving him a real hard time. And so yeah, there's some drama, and tensions are high. So where is this going to go? Very interesting. So I think we might cut it here and recap chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8, maybe tomorrow or something. But so this is kind of the intro. You've met Sergeant Scarada now. You've met Delta Squad now, Ordo. And then we've been reintroduced to see what Etain and Omega Squad have been up to over the past year. So we are back in business. We are back with our boys, back with our clones, back with our Jedi, and some new Mandalorians. So super, super exciting. Love this book. We're going to recap the next few chapters next time we talk, and then have a discussion about it and how we really feel. How does this compare to the shows? Yeah, very, very interesting stuff. Which characters are we loving the most now that there are even more characters? Is Jasmine's simp allegiance changing? I don't know.
I mean, to be fair, I just kind of simp for all the clones.
How can you pick a favorite?
I definitely have my favorites. If you guys really want, I'll do a list of like
Oh my
top
gosh.
list in the book.
Do a ranking.
Ranking.
It's tough, and it
really
changes
is.
as you go along.
Because, like, you know, as you said earlier, they all have their own personalities. They all have their own quirks. The way that they function is so different from each other. And that's why it's just so hard to pick a favorite. And that's why I just kind of sent for all of them. Because they're all just so different.
Yeah.
You can find different bits and pieces to relate to in each clone. And I just really, really like that about them. How some people are like, oh, it's all the same face. It's like, maybe the same face, but it's definitely not the same person.
Yeah, and I will say that this book series taught me that. I went into it probably like the average citizen that it portrays in the book, thinking, clones, friggin', they're all the same. They have no personality. They were brought up in a sterile environment, raised in tubes. Like, they're not human, really. Like, how could they even have personalities? They spent their entire life just training. And then no, you get to reading this and it's like, oh, my eyes are opened and my feelings are hurt. So it's amazing. It's amazing. And every new character, you're like, how in the world could you possibly do more with people that came from the same place, came from the same background, and yet they all turned out so consistent and yet unique. It's incredible. So we'll get into it more next time, but I know we've got some obligations tonight. So it was a lot of fun kind of recapping these first few chapters with you. There's going to be more to come. We are not even through how much we've read so far. So tune back in. And if you want to follow along, I recommend getting the book. Again, it's Republic Commander 000 by Karen Travis. This is the second book. So go speed read the first one, grab this one, read along with us, give us your thoughts, questions, your opinions, who's your favorite, anything like that. We would love to hear about. So now that we've got the Instagram Live sorted out, I think we might be able to do it like this and interact a little bit more with the chat. So this has been fun, but for tonight, at least, I think Sexy Wookiees Ladies Edition Book Club will be signing off. So, Sexy Wookiees.